So we can't hear or see you. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to hop in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that for you. We'll also have a couple of questions that the presenters will have for you, and then some polls as well. So hopefully still some great interaction, even though we can't hear or see you. If you're just joining us, feel free to hop in the chat, introduce yourself, and let us know how many states you've lived in so we can get a feel for who's joining us today. Our presenters this morning are Johnny Lang, who is a DECA Community Support Specialist for Northwest Kansas, and Crystal Dalmasso, who is a DECA Community Support Specialist for South Central Kansas. And they're going to share a little bit about vaping prevention. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
All right, good morning, everybody. So today, we kind of want to identify the objectives of this presentation. So we want you to understand the what, who, how, and why of electronic cigarettes. Some of you may have some familiarity with it. You may have been exposed to some of the prevention efforts. Obviously, it's a hot topic across the nation. So along with just a deeper understanding of electronic cigarettes, we're going to provide you with some tools. And I want to make a point to let you know that from DECA, we also have some e-modules or some e-learning available for you that we can provide for you either in the chat or as this concludes, we'll also send out an email and include it in there. So, Lydia, do you mind launching poll question number 1? And this is just to kind of show you guys how to interact with a poll question, and then also just to kind of gauge where everybody's at with their vaping knowledge.
The poll,
so if you can. I don't know if it launched, Lydia.
It did. It looks like we have 22 people who have participated so far, and they're continuing to climb.
Okay, I cannot see that, but no big deal. Crystal, you can move me on to the next slide, I suppose. Okay, so just whether you know everything about vaping or if you know nothing at all, hopefully we give you something to kind of take away from this. But I just do want to point out the kind of original design of the e-cigarette before it became a little more popular with the Juul and things like that. But this, as you can see on your screen, there's the mouthpiece, and that's where you're able to get, okay, I see the polls right now. Okay, so nobody knows everything. That's the real good takeaway. That's good. We're always learning. That's really good. So again, the mouthpiece, that's where the vapor comes out. That's how you get it in your system. The cartridge is kind of where the juice, if you will, or the e-liquid that they call it, that's where you put that in there. The atomizer heats up, and that's what creates the vapor. And then they all have some sort of a battery. Now this one has an LED light that, you know, the original thought was to kind of illustrate that this is similar to an actual cigarette. So just a real brief description, and then we will continue to talk about this moving forward.
Okay, so before we go forward with a little, want to get into a little history, Lydia, will you pop up that next poll?
Yes, the
next is early mentionings of electronic cigarettes can be found in, what do you guys think? The 1910s, 1930s, 80s, 2000s, or 2010s? Early mentionings of electronic cigarettes.
Crystal, attendees are voting right now.
We'll see. If they've got it, then Johnny, we can wrap up, go home. They know everything, and then we'll be done. We'll give them a second to vote. I love putting this question out there to the youth because they say, well, we'll let you guys vote first, and then I'll tell you what the youth say.
Yeah, honestly, I probably would have picked a completely different time frame.
That's why I love this question.
Yeah, it really is. It's a nice one.
So can you, yeah, let's show the results here. Okay, so interesting results. You audience say the same thing youth do. So sometime in the 2000s, and then I tell them, no, it's back a little bit. And they're like, whoa, it's back, like in history? And I'm like, yeah, like in the 1990s? And I'm like, no, further back. Like way back in my grandparents' days, like in the 1980s. And I'm like, well, further back. And they're not grasping. So to let you know, there actually are some findings of early mentionings in the 1930s of electronic cigarettes. Does that surprise anybody? Nothing like mass produced, but early findings in the 1930s. I'm curious if that surprises anybody on the line. Woo, Gracelyn got it. Good job, Gracelyn. I wonder if she'll teach the rest. Oh, that's okay, but now you got it. Yeah, all right, Jan. Yeah, in the 1930s, early mentionings. It wasn't though, for those of you that put the 2000s, until 2003, a Chinese pharmacist, and I don't know if he pronounces his name Han Lik or Han Like, so I want to apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. He's actually credited with inventing electronic cigarettes as, and I want to pause here to put this word in your mind, as a safer alternative to cigarettes. And I pause and I say safer slowly because we're going to say that word several times through the hour, and I really want to put that in your head, and we'll build that up so that you understand why. But his father was a really heavy smoker, and he passed away from lung cancer. So that drove him to create something that was safer. So in 2007, e-cigarettes were introduced into the American market, much like what you saw Johnny explain in that cigarette-like form. They wanted something to replica what cigarette users were using, but in a safer form. And according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey in 2011, high school student use was already at a 1.5% use. And then in 2015, it jumped to a 16% use. Some people on the call I know are probably not data people, some people are, but I want to put these numbers in your head because we're going to talk throughout the hour about numbers a little bit, and you're going to see how they steadily increased. So 2011, 1.5%. By 2015, 16% across the nation. So pretty important to know that those numbers kind of jumped that quickly, and then you'll see them steadily increase. Sorry, I get excited about this stuff and I forget to do my my job. And then Johnny, if I go over what you're supposed to talk about, you're just gonna have to say, Crystal, stop. So electronic cigarettes, or ecigs, which includes vapes, hookah pens, dab pens, all different names, but what does it mean? It means what our teens call vaping or juuling, you might hear too. They're battery-powered devices, and they're a nicotine delivery system is what they are. They use e-juice, and they contain nicotine. So electronic cigarettes, they're inhaled like regular cigarettes, and they produce this aerosol cloud of nicotine and other substances.
Hey, Crystal.
Sorry, yes, sorry.
Crystal, this is Mike.
Yep.
Just had a comment in the chat box that you're a little hard to hear. If you could stay closer to your mic, they said that would help.
Okay, yes, I can. Sorry. I get excited and I lower and up and down, so maybe I should yell. So while some chemicals may look different than traditional cigarettes, they're not proven to be a safer alternative. Is that better? Can you guys hear me a little bit better? Yes, no, maybe. So you're still inhaling nicotine and you're inhaling other chemicals. And we're going to get into that and talk a little bit more. So again, some may look like everyday items, and many of you have seen these things. If you see the picture, the first picture on your screen here, that was made similarly to what Johnny described, to look like that first cigarette, to mimic so that it was just more of a safer alternative, but people would still grab for that cigarette. And then you see these other everyday items. So now we go to a different target audience, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But you see this thing that looks like an inhaler, but yet it's a electronic nicotine delivery device, looking like an inhaler, but they get e-cig juice with nicotine. It looks like a USB, but it's actually an electronic cigarette. It looks like a hoodie, but it's actually an electronic cigarette. Many of you may have seen online now, they've got the electronic cigarettes that look like a smartwatch, which this is just a smartwatch. I can't take this off, but the top will come off and you can use it much like, or you use it as an electronic cigarette. There are all sorts of everyday items that look like electronic cigarettes. Juul may look different, but it's just a brand of electronic cigarette. And juuling has become the accepted verb among teens. It just simply means to use the electronic nicotine delivery device. No different than when we say, hand me a Kleenex. Kleenex is the brand, but it's Juul is the brand, but it's the device. Some of the other brands we do that with are like Bubble Wrap, Chapstick, Ping Pong, they're brands, but we've just accepted the brands as the item. Still hearing me okay? Johnny, am I all right? Cool. It's all on you now, Johnny. I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Is there another slide that you have with the list of chemicals?
Yep, this is for
Okay.
you.
So you're bringing it in. Go ahead and get that up there.
I apologize. This is for your question that they can put in the chat.
But I need the list of chemicals up there.
My apologies.
No problem. Okay. So now you should see a plethora of chemicals that are found within the e-cig aerosol. Okay. How many of these do you guys think are harmful? And this is just, you can chat about it in the chat box. And you know, that's just so that you all can kind of share. Maybe you know some of these might be particularly harmful, but go ahead and click again. So just all of them, if you misuse e-cig, that's probably a good point. So yeah, the ones that are in yellow are known to be harmful. Now, you know, I would be led to believe that a lot of these are probably not okay. You're right. They're probably not okay to put those inside your body. So while we didn't know this at first, many of these same chemicals are found in your traditional cigarette. ecigs produce that aerosol, and it contains a lot of different chemicals. A lot of these are things that you hear about. Some of them I have never heard about, I can't pronounce. A lot of them are linked to cancer causing. And we all know that nicotine itself, which is listed on here somewhere, over on the far left. So, and that's an addictive compound. So along with all these harmful chemicals, nicotine makes you want to continue to use it. And then you're also putting all these things inside your body. So yeah, this is a vast list of things that are not good for you. Next one, please. So according to the American Lung Association, the aerosol produced by e-cigarettes is not just water vapor, and it's not harmless. So this was kind of the way that it was projected. As Crystal pointed out earlier, the initial idea was that this is a safe option to get you away from using cigarettes. However, as it's become today, yeah, sure, they initially started out by telling you that it's just water vapor, but we're starting to find out there's a lot of other chemicals in there. But you know, our youth have already started to believe that it is a safer option. So, and as you can see here, it contains nicotine, formaldehyde, acrolein, acetaldehyde. Some of them are hard to even say. Glyoxal. So, you know, I know that formaldehyde is not something you would choose to have in your body. It's used to preserve body parts. So we also know or found out that formaldehyde and acrolein were used in chemical weapons in World War I to cause choking and severe throat irritation. So when I first read that or started to kind of look into that, that's really interesting. It's used as a weapon, and it's inside of these devices that kids are getting their hands on. It does cause tiny lacerations inside their throat, which helps for the absorption of the nicotine or whatever chemical is in the product, so faster absorption into the body. The real harm there, the concern, I mean, if you break it down or if you overall, when you hear those things, it's terribly concerning, but it does cause that addiction so much quicker. Next slide, please. Oh, and I missed my point real quick, that some companies like Juul started using nicotine salts, and that's just for that a little bit of a smoother feeling, but they chose to do that so that they, you know, if it was causing some throat irritation, they were kind of moving away from that and getting it so that these, I choose the term youth because it's so popular amongst them, that they're using it, and now it's a smoother delivery system for them. So now this next slide here, you should see your conventional pack of cigarettes on the left-hand side there, and it contains 20 cigarettes, which is about 20 milligrams of nicotine. Okay, your common Juul pod has 41 milligrams of nicotine. So that's about 2 packs of cigarettes within one Juul pod. I've heard where kids will use a couple of these per day, maybe one, some of them spread it out, but that's a whole lot of nicotine within one Juul pod. The Fix pod, which I'm not real familiar with, but it's another popular brand that's out there, has 75 milligrams of nicotine. That's about almost 4 packs of cigarettes. So let's say a kid uses one of these even in a day or two, that is just an insane amount of cigarettes or nicotine within one Juul pod. The final one, and I'm not real sure how to say it, the Swarine, and some of the research that I've done on it, I guess it's popular. It's not as popular around here. Juul's really the hit around Kansas at least. But this particular one is kind of popular due to its sleek design, fits into the pocket real nice. But that one, you know, if you break it down, that's 4.5 packs of cigarettes. That's a lot of cigarettes. And this illustration really shows, look at the ashtray. That's way too much nicotine for anybody, and they're getting hooked really, really quick.
Yeah, Johnny, so we did this presentation not too long ago. Joy and I did in a small community, and we talked to a youth that was using one of these these last ones here, and he was using this high of a nicotine content along with smoking regular cigarettes because he was addicted. So going into the next couple of slides, you will understand more than why he was addicted, or excuse me, why he was using so much nicotine. There are risks to using electronic cigarettes, possible addiction, and then the long-term harm to the brain. And as we go through this, I think it'll become even more evident why he got, over the course of a year, why he got up to using that much nicotine. There's parts of the brain that's responsible for the decision-making and impulse control, and a youth brain in particular has not developed in those areas. You know, we ask youth when we go in and do these presentations, we say, at what age does a youth brain kind of really, you know, at what age have they formed? And even youth will tell you, you know, mid, sometimes even late 20s, depending on the youth. So they know that their brain is still forming. Exposure to the nicotine as a youth will increase the risk for nicotine addiction. It increases the risk for mood disorders, and it permanently lowers their impulse control ability. Nicotine can affect the way synapses are formed, which this can lead to harming the areas of the brain that are associated with their attention control and their learning. So the Surgeon General was concerned about this, which he made a statement on electronic cigarettes and youth use. And he said that it's important to protect our children from a lifetime of nicotine addiction that's associated with health risks by immediately addressing this epidemic. He goes on to say that the aerosol from the e-cigarettes is not harmless, which we've said a couple times during this webinar. He talks about the harmful chemicals, including nicotine. He talks about the lead, the nickel, the tin. So many of those chemicals that Johnny talked about, he says that he talks about in his when he addressed electronic cigarettes. So I would encourage you to go on and to read then what he says about electronic cigarettes if you've not done so.
Hey, Johnny and Christy,
Yes.
we have a question that came in from Angela.
Sure.
Has there been any studies, reports on vaping, smoking history with the death of younger people and severe coronavirus illness hospitalization?
Yes, and we will talk.
No other underlying symptoms may be a factor.
We'll discuss that here in just a moment.
Yeah, good catch. We threw that in just because that's prevalent and what we're going through. So yeah, whoever asked that question, good thoughts. You are ahead of us. So the reaction that nicotine has in the brain, in the stimulation of pleasure, in the center of the brain, when it's inhaled, the nicotine actually enters the brain after passing through the lungs, and then it binds to those pleasure receptors in the brain. That causes the brain to release those pleasure chemicals such as dopamine, providing the user with a kind of a temporary feeling of pleasure. So that this might not really sound dangerous in reality, but the nicotine interferes with the body's natural ability to experience or even communicate pleasure. Nicotine then creates this flood of dopamine and intense feelings. It's that the pleasure center in the brain that adapts to drug use by sensing the extra dopamine and then begins to produce less of it. So the body's getting used to in these vapes that have higher nicotine content, the body's getting used to these higher nicotine content devices, and the body's producing less dopamine. So this means that the user then has a hard time creating natural feelings of pleasure without the nicotine. The user needs more nicotine then to feel normal. And more, the pleasure centers in the brain creates a memory of nicotine and an appetite for it. And so these vaping devices that have the higher content, the body's asking for more and the user is able to get it. The appetite for nicotine, even despite the harmful consequences, we know what the consequences are, is what we refer to as that nicotine addiction. So nicotine, we know, is highly addictive. And what that means is the human brain can develop a strong dependence on the drug that the nicotine user can no longer control their desire or smoking behaviors. Now, I want to say that again, because sometimes we think we can just tell kiddos, don't vape. So nicotine is highly addictive. And remember, we talked about how strong the nicotine is in some of these devices. And the human brain can develop such a strong dependence on those nicotine levels that the nicotine user can no longer control their desire or smoking behaviors. The cycle of nicotine addiction starts with bringing the nicotine into the body. So they inhale the cigarettes, the hookah, the vapes. The nicotine then enters the brain and activates the pleasure centers of the brain. After the level of nicotine in the body, it'll drop quickly. And this drop in nicotine level causes the body to have strong cravings for nicotine. And it's only satisfied when more nicotine is brought into the body. So this cycle is powered by the body's biological reaction to nicotine. It's not controlled by the person that's vaping. So based on this cycle here and kind of these pictures on the screen, what you see, what would you say, and you can use the chat to respond, what would you say then to teens who say, I won't let myself get addicted? Teens or even then adults for what we're learning, if they say, I can vape this and I won't let myself get addicted.
While we wait for a couple of responses, we had a comment from Barb. Interesting comparison that vaping is seen as a safe choice by youth, similar to marijuana being safe and natural. What I see in my work is vaping moving into vaping dabs or carts, marijuana oils.
Right, that word safe seems to be coming up a lot. So they see it as this safe alternative because as we're going to continue to discuss is it's being portrayed as a safe alternative. It's safe use. It doesn't have the harmful chemicals that a traditional cigarette has, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what would you say to somebody who says they're not going to let themselves get addicted? So if they think that they, yeah, okay, so you can't fight your body's chemistry, that's true. It's already out of their control, yeah, for sure. So it's messing with their brain and it's out of their control. Not only is it messing with what's going on in their brain, but it has other effects too on their body. So for example, it can also make your heart beat really, really fast, faster than normal, which then activates that fight or flight response. It can independently cause trouble breathing and damage to your lungs. So keep that in your mind because we're going to talk about what's going on with 19 here in a second because that's an upper respiratory issue. So it can damage your lungs outside of all the chemicals and toxins that are in threats. There are chemicals and toxins in these vaping devices, the e-juice, the vapor, and so in the lungs. Nicotine also, this is this is interesting, increased reflux, because it's damaging, like Johnny was saying, down your throat, down to your body. It's using chemicals that's meant irritation and causing issues. So it's going to cause you to have increased acid reflux. It can also cause insulin resistance, so making it potentially more for those who have diabetes. And nicotine even negatively impact your reproductive organs. So not just the brain does it affect, but it affects the rest of the body as well. And I think there's a misconception. The word safe was used so much that our youth think that these devices are safe, yet it can affect from the brain all the way down. And this is the message we have to our youth.
Just a couple comments, Crystal, about the addiction piece you talked about. Angela mentions you can't fight your body's chemistry. Barb mentions it might be out of your control already. Donna mentions you don't have the control, your body is in control and affect your brain. And then Jan had another comment, if you don't use e-cigs, you're right, you won't get addicted. If you continue to use, you'll eventually become addicted.
Right, and then it's out of your control. So with the high nicotine content, you can become addicted so very quickly. And then Johnny, what do we know then about vaping and COVID-19?
Okay, so obviously COVID-19 or coronavirus is all over the news. We've heard so many different things about it. Honestly, it was one of the last things I wanted to bring to anybody's attention, but it's out there. This is a real thing. And this is why we chose to have a vaping presentation pretty early on with this containment that we're all experiencing, our self-isolations and whatnot, because there is some correlation going on between vaping and youth experiencing some complications with COVID-19. So, and before I don't know if we've talked about this a whole lot. Crystal mentions it a lot about this terminology with being safe or safer. And rather than using scare tactics when we talk to the youth, we really want to present them with the information rather than talking at them. And so I just kind of wanted to, I think we missed maybe mentioning it, but I want to talk about talk they hear you. So when you are mentioning this kind of stuff to the youth, rather than just telling them not to or scaring them, let's talk to them by giving them this information so that they're better prepared to make the right choice. So now into how vaping and COVID-19 are very concerning right now. The Centers for Disease Prevention and Control says that it's 21% of patients are hospitalized, and that's up. It's gone up 21% of the patients hospitalized in the US from COVID-19 are between the ages of 20 and 44. Okay, so you hear in the news a lot that it's only affecting the very, very young or the very, very old. It's simply just not true, and there's some reason behind it, and some of it has connected with vaping. So the doctors are speculating that teens and young adults in the US are more susceptible to the complications from COVID-19. Some studies are showing damage to the cilia system within the lungs. They're the tiny hairs that are protecting the lungs from infections such as COVID-19 and other infections that you could experience. From these studies, the lungs are totally exposed to the environment. So the lungs and the airways have a way to defend themselves against anything that cause injury, especially infections, and that cilia system is a big part of it. So when you damage that cilia system, there's no way to protect your lungs. So, and this is what vaping is causing within these young lungs. There's some lab research that shows the function of cilia cells is impaired when it's exposed to the chemicals that are in the vaping liquid. The American Lung Association estimates the number of teens in the US who vape jumped up 80% from 2018 to 2019. Obviously, we're in 2020 now. I think, I'm not really for sure. Every day's a Monday to me right now, but so those numbers are continuing to rise. There's this dangerous misconception out there that only grandma will get sick from COVID-19. So it's simply not the case. This is a wrong concept. Young people can get sick too, and this is very possible because of the vaping. So the youth are much more susceptible right now.
Hey, Johnny.
So, yes, I see that we have
from Angela. Do you have any resources that we could put out on social media about the correlation between vaping and complications with COVID-19?
We have just some media articles or something like that. Yeah, we can get out there. Right now, there's just some lab studies being done. It's pretty early, but yeah, we can give you those sites where we got this information, and use that however you want on your social media. Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. So definitely dangerous because the vaping chemicals damage the lungs, makes you more susceptible to diseases, and COVID-19 is one of those diseases, and pneumonia is another issue that gets mixed in with the COVID-19 as well. So we want to get this information out there to youth so that they can make their decisions and be informed decision makers. So what's going on with our youth, and what does the youth look like? What is this sense of urgency? So let's start back in, I gave you some numbers for 2015, 2011 to 2015. Let's dial it up a little bit, look at 2018. Across the nation, it jumped up then to almost 21% of high school youth were reporting using electronic nicotine delivery devices. And then what concerned me was the number of middle school youth in 2018 was at about 5% here, 4.9%. We're beginning to use electronic nicotine delivery devices, vapes. And so you can see that these numbers are still rising. One thing though that youth are not using, that they're self-reporting not using, were traditional cigarettes. So youth have gotten the message, hey, we're not smoking, but they're using the electronic nicotine delivery devices. They're doing something different. So what does this mean for Kansas? And for those of you that are outside of Kansas, I urge you to look at your own state and find the numbers for your own state. We're positioned here in Kansas, so we're using Kansas numbers. I apologize for those of you that are outside. Our polls are going to be for Kansas. But Lydia, if you would launch the poll, the next poll, what percentage of 10th and 12th graders, and this is according to the Kansas Communities That Care survey that's put out to teens, so they're self-reporting here, reported trying e-cigarettes, vape pens, or e-hookahs in 2019. What do you guys think it was for across the state of Kansas? And I'll give you just a moment before we go on so that we can see what your thoughts are about this. I would love to report that it's 0%. Unfortunately, please don't put 0. We have a few users. Lydia, do we have responses coming in?
We do, yes. People are voting. It's slowing down a little bit here, so we should be able to stop the poll here in about 30 seconds.
Awesome, great. Get those votes in. Do you think it's 3%, close to 4%, maybe close to 12, in the 30s, or close to 60%? I'll let you take a guess. Maybe if you check, maybe you already know what it is across Kansas. But this is, I looked at 10th and 12th graders. 37, ooh, maybe, oh, it's close, 37 or 58. So you can close that out. So for across the state of Kansas, for 10th and 12th graders, 37.23% have reported using electronic cigarettes in 2019 have ever tried. So thinking about that and thinking across the nation, Kansas has some work to do. And like I said, if you're outside the state of Kansas, I definitely would urge you to check out what your numbers are. And if you know what your numbers are and you're sitting outside the state of Kansas and you want to pop them in the chat, let us know. Let us know what your state is sitting at. Because these youth, they're using them all across the school. They're using them in classrooms. They're using them in the bathrooms. They're using them in their cars. And that's kind of why I chose the 10th and 12th graders, because I also know they had an easier access to them with, and we'll talk about the age in just a second, but before that age was increased, when the age was still 18 that you can buy products, we had seniors that could buy the products and bring them in the school. So they were using them in schools, and they were using them all across the schools. So why were youth so targeted at these things? Why were they getting a hold of them? Why were they using them? Johnny, what do you think?
What do I think, or what do I know?
No, what do you know?
So, yeah, absolutely. It shows that a lot of their attempts to market appear to be geared towards the youth. And we are getting real close to the end of our presentation here, so I may abbreviate a little bit here, but I just want you all to take a look at some of these images here and tell me, and you can chat about it if you want, but tell me what you think with these, you know, colors and young people making it look kind of cool. Who do you think their target demographic is? And then over to the left, you get a real illustration of the media that they're using. Now, obviously, over here it shows that 14.4 million youth are exposed to retail stores. Obviously, right now that's probably a little bit less, but there's a lot of kids going into retail stores. They're marketing 10.5 million on social media or internet, I guess. Things like that, TV, 9.6 million. So there's just a lot out there that can reach the youth. And some of the live presentations that I've given, they talk about it being on YouTube and popping up. I know maybe like on Spotify and even Pandora, there's been some ads for, you know, buy two, get one free or whatever with Juul, things like that. I know it's kind of curbed that a little bit, and now they're kind of looking at some different anti-vaping type material. So here's just another nice slide again about e-liquid versus food. Now this one was really interesting to me because I love Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I see this and I'm like, oh man, I bet that's delicious. So you see the actual food product versus the e-liquid, and they look very, very similar. The packaging, the color scheme, the layout, everything is very, very similar. And no matter how old we are, our mind tells us that we know what we want, we know what we like. So that imagery really connects with the brain, both youth and adult, and makes you kind of crave these different products. Next slide, please.
Hey, Johnny, just a couple comments in there.
Sure.
Shay says that it looks like teens and young adults are being targeted. They look fun and cool. Megan says looks like it's targeted to 12 to 15-year-olds. And Donna says youth and young adults, they want a lifetime of customers that will be around for a while.
Yes, you're all absolutely right. Those are the direct correlations, the connections that have been, yeah, I mean, that's the connection that they're very much attempting to make. They're also spending a lot of money on it. In Kansas alone, guys, $73 million is used from the tobacco companies to market just in the state of Kansas. Again, chat about this. What does that mean to you guys? I mean, that to me, that's just mind blowing. So, and nearly 90% of adult smokers started before they're 18. So that's kind of where there's a not even small, it's a huge victory that they changed the purchase age to 21. As we've talked about before, yeah, they used to be able to buy at 18. The access was there. a lot of kids were able to get their hands on it due to maybe an older brother or sister that was 18. Obviously, I've heard several stories of moms and dads that would purchase it. And I think it, for that, may have something to do with that safer imagery that they're marketing, or, you know, just kind of those different marketing things that we saw before. So I guess just kind of in the essence of time here, we'll move forward.
Yeah, I got a couple comments real quick, Johnny, from Barb. Many times youth are stealing due to the high cost involved with vaping. And Megan says they're making it attached to fun foods and candy, which also implies it's safe and things they know, trustworthy factor.
Yes. So yeah, these are all things that we can talk about and let the teens or youth know. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we wanted to get across today is teens think that they're safe. You know, only 3% of Kansas teens have tried traditional cigarettes in the last 30 days, and that's them self-reporting again, but they are vaping. So what do we want to do? Johnny talked about this earlier. We want to talk to our youth about this. We don't want to talk at them. We want to give them this information and then create a plan with them, talking often with them. It's not a one and done thing. We have to have these conversations constantly with our youth. You know, if we pass a gas station and we see these ads, or if we pass the vape shop, let's have these conversations, open conversations with our youth. Let's get their input. Ask them if their teens have, or excuse me, if their friends have offered these things, these devices to them, and then really actively listen to them and get their input into these conversations. Be prepared for answers. So prepare yourself, prepare your face for their actual answers. But we don't want to talk at them and tell them what to do here. We want to bring them to the table, and we want them to help. We want to give them the tools, and so we want to create the plan with them. What's done, we talked about that age being increased, so that was a win. Now adults have to be 21 to buy these tobacco products. That's a huge win, because we have seniors in high school that are still 18, so these products were easily being brought into the high schools. For those of you on the call, I really do want to mention really quickly that if you work at or for school, you really do want to take a look at your tobacco policy at school. Is it all inclusive? Does it include all tobacco products, not just vapes and e-cigarettes, but also dip? Make sure all tobacco products are included, and it includes everybody, students, staff, visitors, on all school grounds, activities at all times. Make sure that we're sharing this information with parents, not just a handout that goes home, although that's one thing to do, but we have to have multi-levels of information. We have to have different activities and different strategies that we're implementing within our schools to hit different parents. So we're promoting the health messaging, we're updating our health curriculum, we're providing resources, we're empowering our students to do this work. Because once we give them the information, they don't like to be lied to. They don't want to be duped, like they say when we're talking to them. They really do want to take this information and they want to get it into the middle school and to the younger kiddos, because they don't want their brothers and sisters using these devices that contain these harmful chemicals. And if they truly are then addicted, because they can be addicted so quickly, so easily, we want to get them the help that they need. And Johnny has some information about that help.
Hey, real quick, question came in from Darlene. Being so addictive, what is the success rate of those vaping being able to stop?
I really don't know. Crystal, I don't know if you have any information on that.
So that's going to be different state by state, and that's going to be some information that we can look into and get some statistics for you, Darlene. If you want to, we will make sure to get back with you on that for sure. Mike, if you want to take that down, we'll try and get her some statistics on that. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I do know with the cessation information, we want to make sure that we get information specifically for teens and that we can get teens to the doctor as well, because some some of the patches that can be used, the gum that can be used. Some doctors will prescribe to teens as well. Not all doctors, but some will. So we want to make sure to get that information into the parents' hands so that the parents can get their teens to their doctor as well. So Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, and then Nicole just put in the chat too. Kind of some of what I'm going to mention here is that there's a lot of resources out there that are available. You can see them on your screen here. We will include those in the follow-up email. And some of these are really nice because, as you can see, there's a text line that can be used. They are offering the availability prior to vaping becoming so popular. You had to have somebody of at least 18 or an adult present for some of these communication lines, and they're developing ways to where the teens can contact them without any adult so that they can get the help that they need. And that's really helpful because there is some stigma behind it, and knowing when and where to get help is really good. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot of chatting going on over here about available resources. That's really, really fantastic.
And Johnny, you're right. These have all been uploaded to the email that's going to come out afterwards, along with the KDHE site where we pulled a lot of this information. They'll be able to go straight to that site, because I know there was an ask about our presentation, and most of this information was pulled straight, 99% of it was pulled straight from the KDHE site. So we've linked that as well to the email that you're going to get afterwards so that you can pull the same information.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, honestly, guys, kind of concludes our presentation. We're allowing a few more minutes at the tail end here. If you have any additional questions, please put it in the chat. Let us know. We hope that we've achieved the objectives that we set out in the beginning, that we've offered you maybe a little better understanding of e-cigarettes or vaping, how it's being obtained, kind of the marketing schemes that are out there. Yeah, so let us know if you have any feedback or anything. Put it in the chat right now. I can sing a couple songs to kind of take us out, but otherwise, we really appreciate your attendance.
Instead of the song, Johnny, can we get them to, Mike's going to put the evaluation link in the chat. I love your singing, but if they would do the evaluation, that would be a lot more helpful. And then if they don't do it today, it will come out tomorrow as well. But we would really appreciate you if you attended today to do that evaluation, just because we really want to know how we can better get this information to you and improve on our trainings.
I've never been able to sing. I get shut down every single time.
I'm sure you could do it. I'm sure it would be fantastic.
I do have one last question here, guys, from Shelley. Do you have any video resources for college students, for schools that are looking for this, especially during distance learning?
Ooh, our recorded version right now.
Yeah, so this will be recorded. There are some videos too that can be used. They're just little snippets on YouTube, and that is also connected to the KDHE site that you can go. I believe, is it my mind just went blank, but we can get you those links as well.
What was it that you were thinking?
Shelley asked, can we use this? I think you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to make this available, I believe, aren't we, Mike?
Yep.
Yes, please use it. Absolutely. And if you're in the state of Kansas, and we ever get to be out and present in person, that's also available.
Right, and we would be more than happy to help you out and come in on a live webinar as well. So just reach out to us. Doesn't matter where we're at in Kansas, but we can pop in and do a training as well. And Mike, did you get that evaluation link posted in the chat?
I did, and I'm putting it in there one more time right now.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for attending today. We don't want to take up any more of your time. So if you would take that evaluation link, be safe, and join us next Thursday at 10 o'clock. We're going to do cultural competence and sustainability, and you'll have 2 new facilitators to facilitate you through that hour. That should be exciting.
Crystal, can we do a virtual high five?
High five. Nice job, Johnny.
Thanks, everybody.